Oh, thank you so much, Chamberlain. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Business Morning on Sunrise Daily. And yes, the CBN was very busy yesterday. After 2 days of meeting yesterday, we did hear what we've been waiting to hear. I guess it's the rate of the hike that caught a lot of people, because a lot of people had been expecting about 200 basis points. But no way, we did 400 basis points. That's 4%. So from 18.75% to 22.75%. I wonder how that will affect you. I'm sure if you watched our news at 10 yesterday, you got a bit of that. You get more this morning. But let's start from the global space, since we're living in a global world. Oil prices pull back in Asia on Monday as the prospect of delay in the United States rate cutting cycle and rise in the U.S. crude stocks offset a boost on Tuesday from news OPEC Plus might extend its output cuts. Let's look at the numbers right here now. We see Brent dropped 0.36% at $83.35 for a barrel. WTI 78. We see that the gap right there, you know, is really much at this time. $78.59 a barrel. That's down 0.49%. There's a bit of hope because we heard President Biden has been saying that there's hope that they might agree to halt military activities in Gaza for the Muslim holiday month of Ramadan. Perhaps that could be a little bit of buffer to oil prices. However, Israel and Hamas, as well as Qatari mediators, all sounded notes of caution about progress towards a truce in Gaza. All the factors affecting oil prices now. U.S. crude stocks rose at 8.43 million barrels on the weekend of February 23rd. That's according to American Petroleum Institute. Gasoline inventories also fell 3.27 million barrels, and distillate stocks fell 523,000 barrels according to data. These are the factors obviously leading to this drop in price, and we see there's ease in the Middle East, then things become normal, and supply, you know, is as expected, and of course we'll see drop in price. But if the tension continues, and then the Red Sea tension, which is stopping a lot of ships from doing their normal deliveries and logistics are being obstructed, then things get even tighter than they are at this time. Moving over to the grain space now, Chicago soybean futures rose on Wednesday, but remain near their lowest level since November 2020, as cheap South American supply made U.S. beans less competitive in export markets, and speculators are bet on further price declines. Looking at the numbers right there, soybeans gained 0.3% to $11.44, and that's for a bushel. Corn futures also inch higher, but plentiful supply held prices near their lowest since 2020, while wheat fell with as bumper Russian production. Remember, we talked about cheap Russian grain circulating, especially that area, that's the European area, you know, and that of course is reducing prices. And I think Zimbabwe also gained a bit from that grain after months of travel. It landed in Zimbabwe. There you have it, wheat right there, and the most active soybean contract also on the CBOT and all of that. Well, beans are still pouring into the market at harvest progresses in top producer and exporter Brazil, whose crop has not been as badly hit by adverse weather as many analysts had feared a few months ago. Prices in Brazil are so low that the United States is importing Brazilian soybeans at this time. Corn is up. For a bushel, it's about $4.24. Wheat, we already told you, 0.3% down, $5.82 for a quarter of a bushel. Now let's get back to Nigeria, back home here. See what the currency did yesterday. A lot of efforts we've seen from the central bank. The day before, we saw that the Naira gained in the official windows, but yesterday was not so good. We saw that it weakened. On NFX, lost 13 Naira 99 kobo, 1,598. That's for NFX. But at the Nigerian Autonomous Foreign Exchange Market, that's NAFEM, it lost 33 naira to close at 1,615 naira 94 kobo. A lot of effort by the CBN, and sometimes, you know, we just want to ask what was left to do. We listened to Mr. Cardoso yesterday during the MPC, and we saw his heart. You know, when he was talking, I mean, I think the first time a lot of us will see him really express himself that way, and perhaps express some of those frustrations coming from the comments that Nigerians have been making, you know. But I mean, if they are saboteurs, I guess we should get them out and deal with them, you know, and get things right in this country. Well, talking about the central bank, the central bank had released a statement denying the reports that it is resuming weekly sales to bureau de change operators. The regulator calls the story fake, with the aim to trigger panic and uncertainty in the foreign exchange market. On Tuesday, a circular purportedly signed by the acting director of corporate communications, Mrs. Sidi Ali Hakama, was noticed on various platforms, indicating that the CBN will resume interventions through the BDCs. Well, they have said that that's not true. However, there was also another circular, that's the fake one, that was circulating around, and CBN has come to say they are not giving intervention through the BDCs on a weekly basis. They are not doing that, but they have said that eligible bureau de change that meets the criteria will be given about $20,000, but they didn't say how often, but they were giving $20,000 to each qualified BDC to deal with invisible demands, and they're selling it to the BDCs at $1,301 for $1, and the BDCs are allowed to sell to end users at a margin not more than 1%. Please note that the CBN says it's not a weekly intervention, and the circular was signed by the bank's Director of Trade and Exchange Department, Dr. Hassan Mahmood. Busy day for CBN yesterday. Of course, the MPC, the almighty decision, the first one for Mr. Olaimi Cardoso. We had it live here, and we had, of course, the panel discussing it. But let's take a look back there. Sarah, our correspondent, was right there live, and she filed in this report at the end of the MPC decision announcement, and we'll settle on that after this.
This is the first Monetary Policy Committee meeting since July 2023 and the first under the new Apex Bank Governor, Yemi Cardoso.
I hope that decisions of the MPC.
The Monetary Committee meeting is coming at a time when inflation is at an all-time high of 29.9%, triggered by an increase in food prices and living conditions of most Nigerians. It is for this reason that the committee raised the monetary policy rate.
The committee decided to further tighten monetary policy as follows. 1, raise the MPR by 400 basis points to 22.75 from 18.75%.
Some reasons were attributed to the rising rate of inflation by the committee. This includes insecurity and poor infrastructure.
Considering the option of a hold policy, the evidence revealed that previous policy rate hikes have slowed the rise in inflationary pressure, but not to a desirable extent. Members considered various scenarios of hold and hike and concluded that inflation could become more persistent in the medium term and thus pose more regulatory challenges if not effectively anchored.
The Apex Bank boss then gives an account of how a total of 10 trillion naira disbursed for various interventions over 6 years failed to yield the desired results.
The interventions that took place in the recent past were estimated in excess of 10 trillion naira. I'm not talking about ways and means. I'm talking about the interventions that you just asked about. over 10 trillion naira. What was the budget of the federal government of Nigeria? What was the budget of the largest state in Nigeria? Do the math, and it will tell you the extent of damage.
The Monetary Policy Committee of the Apex Bank promises to continue to keep an eye on both the monetary and fiscal authorities to ensure that the nation's economy is restored to the path of growth, while projecting an economic growth rate of 3.3% for the year 2024. From the headquarters of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Sarah Chimugu, Channels Television News.
That's right. That was, well, maybe not the biggest news yesterday because we had the NLC protest and the cost of living crisis also, but that was a very big news yesterday. And of course, the impact will start from today because it came in late yesterday. So we have to discuss this with us, Dr. Muda Yusuf. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Center for Promotion of Private Enterprises. He walks into the studio now to share his thoughts already. We saw your statement yesterday. Yeah. I know you've always been against, good morning, Dr. Yusuf.
Hey, good morning.
So I know you've always been against the CRR, and now we're having it at 45%. So in simple terms, what it means is any deposit from individuals, the bank is only allowed to send out or to give as loan 55% of that deposit. So that is another way the central bank is trying to squeeze money from circulation and perhaps mop up inflation. But you are never a fan of this.
No, you see, particularly those in the real sector, because we are concerned at this stage first about investment, we are concerned about production. Now, those in that space, they're already squeezed. Because even at 32.5% CRR, it was one of the highest you can find anywhere in the world. And that has implications for what you call financial intermediation. Because the whole essence of banking in an economy, primarily and fundamentally, is financial intermediation. And what that means is that the banks help to mobilize resources from the surplus end of the economy to the deficit end of the economy. So if you have a situation where you have not even moved it up to 45%, so that means for every 100 million naira deposit, 45 million will be taken out. On top of that, you have a liquidity ratio of 30%. So 30% of what is left has to be kept in liquid assets. So what is left for lending?
But I mean,
where is the relationship between the banks and the economy?
No, but doesn't it reflect the state that we are in at this time? Seems we are in a desperate state where headline inflation is almost 30%.
You know, even you have said it several times. The key drivers of inflation are not necessarily the credit, because this is going to affect the capacity to lend. This is not a credit-driven economy. The ones that will be affected the most are the few operators in the economy who have exposure, credit exposure to the banks. And you know what the banks are? Once there is this movement, I'm telling you, by this morning, many of those who borrowed money from the banks are already receiving notices of upward review. And the challenge with credit is that you're already locked in. You have taken the money, you have invested it, you have bought machinery, you cannot exit easily. So this is why I'm worried about the implication for the cost of credit, about the implication for financial intermediation. Because if we are talking of growth, we are talking of job creation, it's about the capacity to be able to access funds. And from what we have seen, over time, this hike in interest rate has not actually impacted inflation significantly. And the CBN governor also...
but he did say that it's because it was not backed up, by maybe collaboration from the fiscal side, which has promised to handle. And I guess that's why he's also looking at, apart from talking to the coordinating minister of the economy, also dealing with the FX issue, hoping that putting all of that together will make an impact? Because I remember, I mean, during the former governor, it was a challenge for him, so much so that one of the MPC had to come to start reeling out maybe where we would have been but for the hikes, because there were questions as to perhaps this is not the major driver of inflation in Nigeria, and so it cannot be the one to give the answer to you know, reducing inflation in the country.
That is the point. Because the way the hike has come across now, particularly the magnitude, I mean, this is huge. This is the biggest, perhaps, in the history of MPC. You move CRR from 35 to 45, MPR from 22 point...
yeah, but Dr. Yusuf, don't forget that we have missed some meetings. So maybe we would have still been here at this time if we had had meetings from July last year.
No, the important thing is that monetary policy instruments alone cannot deal with this problem. And to the extent that this is going to create a major squeeze, both within the banking system in terms of the financial intermediation role, and from the perspective of the investors in the economy, who also need funds to be able to create jobs and all of that. To that extent, I had expected that these things should have been gradual, irrespective of the fact that we have omitted some MPC meetings. And we focus a lot more on the biggest drivers of inflation. We are talking about FX. FX issue is not so much of this credit issue. It's more of a major issue, fundamental issue with supply. Of course, the CBN has been taking steps to deal with issue of supply. The fiscal authorities have been taking steps to mobilize more foreign exchange. That is fine. And hopefully those reforms will yield some results. But to put all the pressure on those who have borrowed money from the banking system, I think it is likely to be counterproductive. That is the concern that I have.
So what do you see, how do you see this playing out now? Like you've noted, a lot of these people who are going to be immediately affected are those who have already taken facilities from the banks. How do you see it playing out now in the real sector?
No, it's going to affect them adversely, because we are talking about businesses who are already grappling with FX problem. They are still struggling with that. They are grappling with all these custom exchange rates, which the CBN has not really done something concrete about. We have been advocating that that exchange rate should be fixed as maybe 1,000 naira. And that will bring some relief. They are grappling with the issue of cost of diesel. Diesel is now 1,003, 1,004. You know the implication of that. Then you have a populace that is also grappling with purchasing power. So this is a big issue. I admit that policy sometimes there has to be trade-offs. You know, in an attempt to solve one problem, you create another problem. But we have to look at these trade-offs properly so that the net effect on the overall economy will not be too profound. Because quite frankly, the magnitude of this jump is too much for me. Yeah.
Then let's talk about the FX part too. Yes. The CBN governor was very emphatic about regulation and the new rules. And we did also see a statement yesterday that they will resume selling dollars to, or FX to, the BDCs. And some people said, isn't that one of the weaknesses of the former administration?
No, you see, the BDCs also have a role to play in the chain. Because when you talk about retail forex transactions, it should not be something that the banks should be dealing with. You need 500, you need 200, you need 1,000, 2,000. Why must you be going to the banks for that? You know? So the BDCs are supposed to be attending to the retail end of the market, just as you have in the banks. You have the first-tier banks, you have those in the middle, you have the microfinance banks. The same thing should happen in this space. And because they relate, you know, to the retail end, to the informal economy, they have a role to play. But the way we now channel the funds and the kind of margin, because I'm seeing a margin of whether 1% or something, about what they are giving. I don't know how they want to monitor that. That to be a tall order. So we may have to re-examine that. But I know that they have a role to play, either through this kind of channeling of some funds or giving them some other windows for them to be able to also get funds directly, which they can also make available at the retail end of the economy. We have so many small businesses. We have a very big informal economy, you know, and they have easier access to the BDCs because the volume of documentation, those things are much less. So the velocity of transactions is much faster with them. They respond very fast. They don't waste your time. So they also have their own value. But we need to have a framework that also prevents abuse.
Exactly. I guess that's where the governor says regulation is going to be, they're going to be very strict about regulating.
They have to be very strict, and we need to also watch out for illicit funds. I think he also referred to that. Because there are a lot of funds in the system that are also chasing these effects. Funds that were not products of any genuine economic activities. So this is also creating distortions, and these are variables that we need to capture in the policy process.
So Dr. Yusuf, now, we're meeting again in about a month.
Yeah.
What do you see between now and then? I guess that will also determine the decision that we will have then.
Well, of course, the CBN will have to monitor the trend, the impact on inflation, the impact on FX, and what the fiscal authorities are also able to bring to the table. So, I mean, the totality of that will determine what the next step is. But certainly, not to go and put additional pressure again.
So you think
on investors.
Perhaps by March, either there'll be a hold or a cut?
Yes, something like that. No, at best maybe a hold.
At best
a hold, yes.
All right, Dr. Yusuf, thank you so much
for
your time this morning.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, now let's get to the market now. Well, the announcement was made late yesterday at about 3 o'clock. Started by 2, so about 3 o'clock. So, of course, it was too late for the market to react. So, of course, we expect the markets to react by today. But let's see what happened at the close of trade yesterday. For the NGX, the equities markets in Nigeria, is still in the red, 1.39%. And we're losing that 55 trillion naira. But I think the heartbreaking one is that we're now on 100,000. That's so close to the edge. I don't think we want to get back to that figure right there. You know, we're just now doing 100,000. Now, if we see the movers of that market yesterday, we see volume value all in red. Deals just at 9,000 at the close of trade. And the top losers, FBN Holding, the Multiverse, and the almighty MTN Nigeria. Let's go to the fixed income market now. Federal government bond opened again quietly yesterday. Activities still in the early hours of the trade. Most market participants traded cautiously because they were still waiting to see the result of that meeting, which we saw at the end of the day. So at the end of it, we had 39 deals worth 41.80 billion. And I think we also have the auction for the second quarter, but let's stay on the MPC. And we have Bosun Obembe. Hi, Bosun, good morning.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So I guess it was too late by the time the MPC decision came yesterday. So, but there was a lot of quietness even from the day before, from Monday to yesterday. And we didn't see a lot of movement because I think investors were just waiting to see what the decision would look like.
Yeah, so it was a calm section yesterday because the market already expected that MPC will increase the rate, and it's already been factored into this bond pricing. If you look at the Treasury stop rate for last week, it was at 19%, so which was higher than the MPR of 18.75. So expectation was that this rate will go up. So it wasn't really something that is not expected. And but we have the NTB auction coming next week because we got the calendar for the second quarter auction yesterday. So for what we are expecting that based on the trend, what we've seen is a DMO usually overset. So we expect that because the MPR is the transmission mechanism for all rates in the market. So we expect that at the next auction, next week we have about 361 billion maturing, which DMO will roll over. And based on trend, they will oversell as well. So by the time they oversell, we will see the impact of this movement in rate on the stop rate. But if you look at the yield, currently we're at the 23%. So there is a need for a little uptick maybe next week.
What about FAC inflow? Is that impact over?
So what the FAC inflow would do is to actually boost the system liquidity. But remember, if you look at the decision yesterday, the major one is the increase in CRR from 32.5 to 45%. That is a lot of money that will leave the system. So I believe by the time the FAC comes in today, most of it will be debited by CBN as CRR, because most of the bank they've not made it 45% CRR ratio. So by the time you look at maybe a bank that has say 1 trillion in deposit, and CBN has increased the CRR to 45%, so that is 45% minus 32.5% before. So that is a lot of money that will leave the system. So that will be a lot of liquidity leaving the system. So by the time FAC comes in, is going out with the increase in this CRR.
So from your perspective now, by the time the MPC is meeting again next month, a month from now, do you see the issue of inflation being, even if at least touched, even if it's on the surface, with all of this aggressive mop-up technique?
I think we've already started seeing the impact of this CBN policy. The objective is to actually target the inflation and to address the instability in the exchange rate, which at least from what we've seen some interest from the foreign portfolio investors. If you look at the exchange rate, before now it was trending as 1718, but yesterday there were a lot of clients looking to actually offer their funds at 16 level, so which was something unusual before. And then most of these guys, what they were using this money for is to buy Treasury B, which are getting at 18 to 19%, which I think they are comfortable at that level. So by the time the FX, they bring the FX.
I think we lost Bosso Bembe there. Okay,
Treasury B,
Bosso, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, you were off for a bit. Could you conclude your thoughts?
So I was saying that we saw a lot of foreign portfolio investors, so they are bringing in the dollars and they are converting it to Naira. So the Naira is leaving the system. So I was saying there will be a lot of illiquidity in the system, liquidity squeeze. And by the time they have the next MPC, I'm sure rate will have found its right level at that time. And so the conversation will be around, okay, looking at maybe if there's going to be an increase, it will not be like the 400 basis point that we saw yesterday. I believe the CBN is actually doing the right thing. The only thing left is for the fiscal side to do their own portion. I believe the CBN, from the monetary side, they've done their own part. So the fiscal side has to do their side too, to address and control the inflation. Yes,
obviously, the economy cannot run only on the monetary side. There's a need for a handshake between both sides. But thank you so much, Bosso Bembe, fixed income dealer with Access Bank.
Thank you for having me.
So we'll be counting the rates and hoping that the numbers around the inflation rates drops, just before we have the next meeting, so we cannot have that much of aggression when they are tightening. But that's the much we can take here on Business Morning. Back to Sunrise Daily.